Hi there. I was just watching this video of a guy of Occupy Washington being picked out of a crowd in broad daylight. Nothing is going on, and he's being chased. Of course, he tries to find out why he's being chased by the police, and then the police push him on the ground and tase him. And everybody's watching and calling for justice and looking on and basically doing nothing. I think that's amazing. It demonstrates how incredibly misguided these people are that do the Occupy protest. I talked to a lady a few days ago, and she too was like, let's find your passion and do whatever you want, and this is just about awareness. And that's coaching talk, that's NLP talk, that's basically demobilizing, diffusing, making it chaotic. Let me explain how you go about achieving anything with your Occupy movement. There's several things that needs to change, and then there's a simple principle that can tell you that you can always win. First of all, it's the wrong crowd, in my opinion. It should be the middle class. The middle class is the ones that are trying to maintain their independence and are trying to maintain their activity. Of course, there's an oil scarcity and there's possibly an oil war going on, so a lot of what they do cannot go on, but they are the smart people, they are the entrepreneurs, they are the people that build a society. Historically, it has always been the middle class that has been able to stand up, and that has another reason, because people follow the examples of middle class people, because most of the people are middle class, or they look up and they want to achieve that. That's the biggest group. It's not, we might believe that we look up to the 1%, but we don't. We look up mostly to people just like us, in new clothes and active and engaged and smart. That's what we are inspired by. Of course, the occupiers all seem or project an image of being out of a job, having time to spend in tents on the street, not achieving anything. That's exactly what you don't need. Basically, you don't want to be shown or associate with an image of powerlessness. And the whole powerlessness stems from what is really the point of what I'm talking about, and that is the belief in justice. There's still a very deep-rooted belief in the justice system in the US, and I think that's completely ridiculous. It's simply wrong. There's no justice anymore. There's Homeland Security, Patriot Act, ACTA, all the other laws that have been made, so there's no habeas corpus. You can basically be picked off the street without any warrant and be put into Guantanamo Bay and forgot about forever. That's the reality. Anybody. But it's not done, but it can be done. Extra rendition, all that stuff. It's not a fable, it's not a myth, it's not a fantasy, it's true. There's prisoners that are having to pay to be in prison, but yet the prison itself receives hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to have that prisoner there. And what do? They produce goods and services, just like they would in the outside world. So it's a business. But there's a very deep truth in legal systems, and a very fundamental one, and that is completely on the side of whoever is now frustrated with the way it's going. And that is that fair law is cheap, unfair law is very expensive. So fair law, in Holland we have relatively fair law, I would say. I really have nothing to complain about. And that means that I'm not a criminal. I don't commit crimes, I don't steal, I work for my money. If I go out on the street and I see somebody do something wrong, I'm basically motivated to call the police and say, listen, this is something happening. If I see a car broken in or I see somebody putting waste in the street, I have the impulse to call the police and say, listen, you can come over. And that makes the work of the police first of all, my belief in the fact that it's fair makes me much quieter and more relaxed. And makes me much more decent, so a better example for others. Second of all, if there is a crime committed, people are motivated to gang up and band up together, and I've witnessed it a few times, and I've also been involved in it. That if somebody is violent in the street, you just knock him out. I was in my grocery store the other day, and there was a guy stealing stuff from it, and he was quite a big guy, so I followed the guy that was in charge there, so that if this guy had an idea of starting to fight, he wouldn't, because I was there. I didn't have to do anything, but that's the principle. You get people, citizens, promoting fairness and promoting justice. And it makes it very cheap. That's the key to what I'm trying to say. It makes it extremely cheap to have justice. You know, if somebody carries around a knife in Holland, it's not usual, a sharp knife, and we are not scared by it, but we think, hey, this is not right. It's not allowed to have a knife that has a longer metal part that's longer than 20 centimeters or something like that. It's a lethal weapon. Why would anybody carry that around? Etc. etc. But it makes legal system very cheap to have, and and we call on justice, and that makes it even possible to have this type of justice. So just law, a legal system that is fair, is cheap, and is possible therefore. Unfair law, so let's say if the police has the ability to search everybody without a warrant in the street, and they would find a hobby in searching pretty women all the time, frisking them in the street because they simply want to grope, and you know, or they're corrupt, and that's a usual thing, and everybody accepts it because everybody in the police system was corrupt. That would be unfair. And if the laws are changed to allow that, that would be of course deeply unfair. And if it, all those things, in principle they should evoke a response. But the way that it usually works is that people remain, let's say, attached to the fair law reality, which is a fantasy, and then they start behaving fair, like you see with Occupy protesters, and they start saying, well, you can do this, and read him his rights, and all that stuff. While the police officers in this situation clearly don't give a damn about fair law anymore. But because people are attached to that fantasy of fair law, they are very cheap to manage. Because they don't respond. You see the guy being dragged away and everybody stands around and nobody does anything. That's not, you see, and it has to, and it is exactly that. It's an illusion of living in a fair law, or a desire to live in a fair law society, which you are not, then abiding by that fair law society and making yourself very cheap to manage. The opposite should happen. If you want to, let's say, fight a legal system that is unfair, you have to prove that it is expensive because it's unfair. And if you want to prove that it's expensive, you have to put it under pressure of acting to enforce itself. So if you, let's say, if you have a fight between two, let's say, we are two people, I think that I'm the law, and I'm telling you to do something in a certain way, and you suffer from it and you don't like it. If you don't respond, if you don't give me a hard time, then I keep believing that that's the easiest way for me to go about things, and I'll do it like that. You know, it's just fantastic. You know, you clean the house, everything, and I'll just sit on my ass and I ask for dinner, and if you don't make a nice dinner, I'll get very, very insulting. And psychologically that works, that you feel less and less and less, and therefore you feel less and less capable of doing anything. And of course the Occupy Mule movement is a very good example of that. Those are people projecting an image of a part of society that is already very weak, and they call for justice. It's perfect. That's the one that you want to be occupying. That's the group that you want to be occupying. It doesn't help if you're like look the same and you say I'm a lawyer. No, that doesn't help. You have to look like a lawyer. You have to look like somebody with means, with power and ability. And then you stand between them, and that will help. But so if 300 million Americans all decide that they want to get rid of the whole Patriot Act and all that stuff, the only thing they have to do is start putting pressure on it, start making it work for what it wants. And that's the only thing you need to do. So if you and that doesn't have to mean you're a criminal. That doesn't have to mean that you are committing a crime. And after all, the decision whether you have committed a crime is never decided by the law. It's always decided by the judge. If it's not decided by the judge, then you have to make sure that it is decided by the judge. Which once again means that you have to work together in order to force that, to force a communication between a human being, which is you, and a human being, which is the judge, and a human being that it have to find the means to keep you incarcerated, and another human. It's that system. That's the only system that can eventually solve these situations. So in the case of this guy, protester, Occupy protester, he's been hauled off. Everybody should drag and clump around him and say, listen, let this guy go right now. Let him go. If you don't want to let him go, take us with you. Take everybody with you. And do it like that. If you have the manpower, but we might walk away, and if you shoot us, well, you probably won't shoot us because that's kind of blatant killing, and we don't expect you to do that. But if you try to shoot us, then of course we have the right to defend ourselves against completely unwarranted violence. And that's the way, that guy would not have been arrested if everybody would have stood around him, or they would have to arrest everybody, which would be very expensive and would require organization and allocation of resources, which would be difficult. And that would be one time, and another time, but eventually the resources would be depleted. Why? Because the law that's being enforced is not fair and people don't want to abide by it. I had a discussion with somebody, and I do recently, and it's about our Geert Wilders, our politician that is in our parliament, and he basically is funded by unknown sources. He doesn't have the 1,000 membership for his party. He does it all by himself. And the response I got from somebody is that, well, he plays by the rules. And so what can you do? And then I explained, well, Hitler played by the rules, and when he was in the parliament, he changed the laws of the government and all this stuff. And the person said, well, yeah, but Hitler also played by the rules, and he had the right to do that. No. The rules are simply a distillation to make it very clear what people usually want. And that's what you put into law. But at the same time, people still want what the law says. They have to want it. And if they don't want it, then the law cannot exist. That's what democracy means, in my opinion. And there's another example. We basically abolished the mechanism by which if you have a subscription to a gym, that they can prolong that subscription for another year without telling you, which is super annoying because you go to the gym a couple of times and you get demotivated and you forget about it, and at the end of the year you get a letter, okay, you're another year, you're a member of the gym. Well, people don't like that, and somebody took it up to change the law so that now you can always end your subscription within a month. And that's it. That's fair. And the guy got a lot of support, and but people are not aware that they should. I guess this works really well, and it's an example of say the law changing to what is easiest and what is most supported by people, which is the way it should be. But even in this situation where everybody thinks, yes, finally, I don't get ripped off anymore, people have not really forced that event. It's the guy himself that made the law, that found out that he had to pay another 120 euro or something for another year while he was not using the services of the gym. And I think that's something that's weak in society. Maybe this video is way too long and I'm just babbling on, but know that the law is you, and if you don't agree with the law, then create a situation in which the cost of the injustice that you perceive is too high to maintain it. Anyway, that's my opinion about this Occupy movement. And I think it's a general principle that basically holds true. If injustice is too expensive, it will cease to exist.